Nestled in the heart of an ancient forest, hidden from the eyes of the world, there lay a mystical garden known only to those who sought it with a true heart. The garden was a place of wonder, where time seemed to stand still, and the air was thick with the scent of blooming flowers. These were no ordinary flowers, for each one held within its petals the forgotten dreams and memories of those who had wandered through the garden's winding paths. The garden was tended by an old gardener, whose name and age were lost to time. He had tended the garden for as long as anyone could remember, though few had ever seen him. The villagers spoke of the garden in hushed tones, passing down stories of its magical properties and the peace it brought to those who entered its gates. But the garden was not easily found, for it revealed itself only to those who were ready to let go of the burdens they carried. One such seeker was a woman named Amrita. Amrita had lived a life filled with both joy and sorrow. But as the years passed, the weight of her past began to bear down on her. She was burdened by memories of mistakes she had made, regrets that haunted her, and even the joys she had once cherished now seemed like distant, unattainable dreams. She felt trapped by the stories of her life, unable to move forward, yet unwilling to let go. Amrita had heard whispers of the mystical garden, a place where one could find peace and solace, where the burdens of the past could be released. Desperate for relief, she set out on a journey to find the garden, hoping that within its walls she might find the peace she so desperately sought. After many days of travel, Amrita found herself at the edge of an ancient forest. The trees were tall and imposing, their branches intertwining to form a canopy that blocked out the sky. The forest was dark and quiet, the air thick with the scent of earth and moss. Amrita hesitated for a moment, unsure of what lay ahead, but her desire for peace pushed her forward. As she walked deeper into the forest, the path before her seemed to shift and change, guiding her towards an unknown destination. The air grew warmer, and a soft light began to filter through the trees, illuminating the path with a very gentle glow. Amrita felt a sense of calm wash over her, as if the forest itself was leading her to where she needed to be. Finally, she came upon a gate, an ancient ornate structure entwined with vines and flowers. The gate was ajar, and beyond it, Amrita could see the garden she had heard so much about. She took a deep breath and stepped through the gate, entering the garden of forgotten dreams. The garden was more beautiful than Amrita had ever imagined. The flowers were in full bloom, their colors vibrant and varied, each one more exquisite than the last. The air was filled with their fragrance, a sweet, intoxicating scent that seemed to fill her with a sense of peace and contentment. The garden was alive with the sound of birdsong, the rustling of leaves, and the gentle trickle of a nearby stream. As Amrita wandered through the garden, she noticed that the flowers seemed to glow with an inner light, as if they were illuminated by the dreams and memories they held. She felt a strange pull towards them, as if the flowers were calling to her, inviting her to come closer. As Amrita walked among the flowers, she began to feel a strange sensation, a lightness, as if the burdens she had carried for so long were beginning to lift. She paused by a particularly beautiful flower, its petals a deep velvety red. As she leaned in to inhale its fragrance, she felt a memory stir within her, one that had long haunted her thoughts. It was a memory of a mistake she had made many, many years ago, one that had caused her great pain and regret. The memory had been a constant source of anguish, a reminder of her failures. But as she stood there, inhaling the sweet scent of the flower, the memory began to fade. The details blurred, the emotions dulled, and soon it was as if the memory had never existed. Amrita felt a pang of fear as she realized she was forgetting something that had once been so important to her. She reached out, trying to grasp the memory, to hold on to it, but it slipped through her fingers, just like sand. She felt disoriented, unsure of who she was without the memory. But as the memory faded completely, a sense of relief washed over her. The weight that had once burdened her heart was now gone, and in its place was a feeling of lightness and freedom. Amrita took a deep breath and continued walking through the garden, her steps lighter and her heart undisturbed. As Amrita continued to explore the garden, she found herself forgetting more and more of the memories that had once defined her. The regrets, the mistakes, even the joys, each one faded as she wandered among the flowers. At first, the loss of her memories frightened her, but as she let go of each one, she felt a growing sense of peace. It was just then that she encountered the gardener. He was an old man with kind eyes and a very gentle smile. He was tending to a patch of flowers, his hands moving with practiced ease as he cared for each one. "Welcome, Amrita," the gardener said, his voice warm and soothing. "I've been expecting you." Amrita was surprised that the gardener knew her name, but she felt a sense of comfort in his presence. "I have come to this garden seeking peace," she said, "but as I walk among the flowers, I find myself forgetting who I am. It frightens me, yet I also feel lighter, freer. Can you tell me what is happening to me?" The gardener nodded, understanding her confusion. "This garden holds the forgotten dreams and memories of all who enter," he explained. "As you walk among the flowers, the memories and attachments that have burdened you are being released, leaving you free to remember your true self." "But how can forgetting help me remember?" Amrita asked, still unsure of what the gardener meant. The gardener smiled gently and gestured to the flowers around him. "These flowers are like your memories," he said. "They are beautiful, but they can also be heavy, binding you to a past that no longer serves you. By letting go of these memories, you create space for something greater, the remembrance of your true self, unburdened by the stories and identities you once clung to." Amrita listened carefully, beginning to understand the wisdom of the gardener. "So in forgetting, I'm not losing myself, but rather, I'm finding who I truly am." The gardener nodded. "Yes, Amrita. Sometimes to remember who we truly are, we must first forget who we think we are. The stories we tell ourselves, the identities we create, these can become cages that keep us from experiencing the freedom of our true nature. By letting go, you're not losing anything. You're gaining the clarity to see yourself as you truly are." Amrita felt a deep sense of peace as she absorbed the gardener's wisdom. She realized that the memories she had been so afraid to lose were not the essence of who she was. They were simply stories, moments in time, and by letting them go, she was freeing herself to live fully in the present, unburdened by the past. So with the gardener's words in her heart, Amrita continued to wander through the garden. She no longer feared the forgetting. Instead, she embraced it, knowing that each memory she released brought her closer to her true self. And as she walked, she came upon a large, radiant flower that seemed to glow with an inner light. She felt drawn to it, sensing that this flower held something important, perhaps the final memory that she needed to let go of. Amrita knelt by the flower and closed her eyes, allowing herself to fully experience the moment. As she inhaled the flower's fragrance, she felt a deep sense of calm wash over her. The last of her memories began to fade. The joys, the sorrows, the triumphs, and even the failures. All the stories she had once clung to dissolved into the air, leaving her mind clear and her heart open. And for a moment, there was only silence, pure, peaceful silence. Amrita felt as if she was floating, unbound by time or space, free from the weight of her past. She was no longer the woman burdened by memories and regrets. She was simply a being of light, free to experience the fullness of life without attachment. And as the final memory faded completely, Amrita opened her eyes and looked around the garden. Everything seemed more vibrant, more alive, as if she was seeing the world for the first time. She felt a deep sense of connection to everything around her. The flowers, the trees, the sky, and the entire earth. She was no longer separate from the world. She was part of it, fully present in the moment. As Amrita stood in the garden, she felt a deep sense of peace and contentment. She had let go of the stories that had once defined her, and in doing so, she had found something greater: the remembrance of her true self, unburdened by the past. The gardener approached her, his eyes filled with kindness. "How do you feel, Amrita?" "I feel free," Amrita replied, her voice soft with wonder. "I feel as if I have shed a heavy burden that I didn't even realize I was carrying. I have forgotten so much, yet I feel more whole, more complete than ever before." The gardener smiled, pleased with her response. "You have remembered the essence of who you are," he said. "Without the weight of your memories, you are free to live fully in the present, to experience life with an open heart. This is the true gift of the garden, the gift of remembering through forgetting." Amrita nodded, understanding what the gardener had meant. She realized that the memories she had once thought were so important were not the essence of who she was. They were simply experiences, and by letting them go, she had made space for something far greater: the fullness of life, lived in the present moment. So with a heart full of gratitude, Amrita thanked the gardener and took one last look around the garden that had given her so much. She knew that she would carry the wisdom of the garden with her wherever she went, and that the peace she had found here would remain with her always. As she left the garden and made her way back through the ancient forest, Amrita felt a sense of lightness and joy that she had never known before. The world around her seemed brighter, more vibrant, and she felt a deep connection to everything she encountered. Amrita's journey continued. She understood now that the journey of life was not about holding on to the past, but about embracing the present moment with an open heart. She had learned that sometimes the path to true peace and enlightenment requires us to let go of the stories and identities we once clung to, and in doing so, we find the true essence of who we are. Amrita's journey continued, but she was no longer burdened by the weight of her past. She walked with a light step, her heart open to whatever life had in store for her. And as she moved through the world, she knew that she was exactly where she was meant to be, free, at peace, and fully alive. The Garden of Forgotten Dreams remained a place of wonder, where those who were ready to let go of their burdens could find peace and remember their true selves. And though Amrita had left the garden behind, its wisdom stayed with her, a reminder that sometimes, to remember who we truly are, we must first forget who we think we are. Good night and namaste.